The Effects of Socialism, Presentation 12, Part B, The Danger of Empowering the State. As we've seen throughout this series, egalitarianism, or removing economic as well as political inequality, under the guise of fairness and social justice, requires collectivism. Collectivism, using slogans like, "We're all in this together," subordinates individual freedom and rights to the collective or the society in pursuit of a quote-unquote common good defined by those in power. And statism, using authoritarian regulatory control, is required to implement egalitarianism and the quote-unquote common good objectives of those in control. These three pillars of socialism are at odds with a free society. Friedrich Hayek wrote on collectivism that it differs from individualism and that its proponents want to organize society and its resources for specific goals, often defined loosely as the common good, refusing to recognize autonomous spheres in which the interests of individuals are supreme. Collectivism is incompatible with a free society where individuals should be allowed to follow their own values and preferences and not somebody else's. The individual is the ultimate judge of his own well-being, and his own views ought to govern his actions. Ayn Rand defined the common good as a meaningless concept unless taken literally, in which case its only possible meaning is the sum of all the various goods of all individual men involved. However, it's not used in its literal sense by those who advocate collectivism, but it is used precisely for its elastic, indefinable, mystical character that provides a moral blank check for those who use it. Furthermore, when the common good of a society is regarded as something apart from and superior to the individual good of its members, it means that the good of some men takes precedent over the good of others, with others consigned to sacrifice their interests. This is not compatible with a free society. A free society does not require the sacrifice of anyone's interests, be it to another powerful individual or even to a majority. It leaves no possibility for any man or group of men to serve his own interests by enslaving other men. Growth of the welfare state within free societies. The moral blank check provided by the notion of the common good has allowed an unlimited proliferation of the welfare state, with a corresponding expansion in the size and scope of government. The result has been increasing financial burdens on the productive citizens, businesses, and the economies of societies that have embarked upon this road. Thomas Sowell wrote that the alternative to political crusades and government programs of quote-unquote entitlements is not that we should do nothing, as it is sometimes thoughtlessly phrased. There's never been a moment in the entire history of the United States when nothing has been done to offset the undeserved misfortunes of the poor and the disadvantaged. Indeed, as Milton Friedman has pointed out, the period of the greatest opposition to the role of government in the economy in the 19th century, the time characterized by robber barons, was also a period of unprecedented growth of private philanthropy. Sowell also wrote that social justice is not about the rules of the game. It is about putting particular segments of society in the position that they would have been, which is virtually impossible to determine, but for some undeserved misfortune. This conception of quote-unquote fairness requires that third parties, namely the government, must wield the power to control outcomes, overriding rules, standards, or the preferences of people, along with a corresponding increase in the size and scope of government. The greater the degree of redistribution, regulation, and direction, the greater the amount of authority assumed by the government, and the larger the size and centralization of the government. This increase in governmental power is outside the realm of what our Constitution has prescribed to protect individual rights and property rights of the people from governmental tyranny. The cost of statism is the loss of individual liberty. As we've seen, Skousen described ruler's law as an inverted power pyramid, where power and control are dispensed from the ruler or the government in a top-down fashion, with the individual at the bottom of the pyramid. Ruler's law equals totalitarianism and tyranny. People's law, on the other hand, is consistent with freedom and individual rights and self-government. The individual is at the base of the power pyramid, and limited power is granted to the government and dispensed in a bottom-up manner. People's law is the basis on which our founders designed a system consistent with a free society. There is an inverse relationship between freedom and statism. As freedom increases, statism or government control decreases. And as statism or government control increases, freedom decreases. The inverse relationship between individual liberty and statism can also be understood in the form of a graph. For example, the system that our founders had set up had a very high level of individual liberty and a very low level of governmental control. As statism or government control increases, society moves away from freedom toward totalitarianism. Compare the system that our founders set up with the system that American progressives would like to implement. You'll notice that statism increases as we move toward progressivism. And the trend in the United States of America over the last 100 years has been one of increasing progressivism, with decreasing individual freedom and increasing statism. As we've seen in this series on the origins, evolution, and effects of socialism, as societies adopt a greater degree of socialism, statism or government control increases, and individual liberty is subordinated and decreases. Consequently, free societies are undermined and destroyed. Increasing socialism and government control is a slippery slope from freedom to slavery. If a society is to remain free, it must control its government. Michael Bettler, in his book Rational Individualism, A Moral Argument for Limited Government and Capitalism, points out that governments cannot have rights. Only individuals can have rights. Power can only be acquired by governments at the expense of individual rights. Therefore, governments of free societies are granted permissions from their citizens to enforce the laws that protect individual rights, and these permissions can be revoked by the citizens. Ayn Rand wrote that a private individual may do anything except which is legally forbidden, and a government official may do nothing except which is legally permitted. Furthermore, she stated that we are fast approaching the stage of the ultimate inversion, where the government is free to do anything it pleases, while the citizens may act only by permission. Key points for Section 12b on the dangers of empowering the state. Social justice or egalitarianism requires collectivism to focus the population to work toward the quote-unquote common good as defined by those in charge. Collectivism is not compatible with individual rights and freedom of choice. The implementation of social justice or egalitarianism requires statism, or an authoritarian government that subordinates individual rights, property rights, and the rule of law to achieve its goals. As statism increases, individual liberty decreases. Individuals should be allowed to follow their own values and preferences and not somebody else's. The individual is the ultimate judge of his own well-being, and his own views ought to govern his or her actions. The principal references for socialism, origins, evolution, and effects, are A Conflict of Visions, Ideological Origins of Political Struggles by Thomas Sowell, Against Leviathan, Government Power in a Free Society by Robert Higgs. Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal by Ayn Rand. Free to Choose by Milton and Rose Friedman. Political Ideologies by Leon Baradat. And Rational Individualism, A Moral Argument for Limited Government and Capitalism by Michael Bettler. Principal references continued. The Fatal Conceit, The Errors of Socialism by F.A. Hayek. The Intellectuals in Socialism by F.A. Hayek. The Making of Modern Economics, The Lives and Ideas of the Great Thinkers by Mark Skousen. The Quest for Cosmic Justice by Thomas Sowell, and The Road to Serfdom by F.A. Hayek.